Before Ignition can connect to a database, first we have to install one. Let's walk through installing MySQL onto our computer here. You can see I have a browser open. I have Chrome open specifically, but it shouldn't matter too much which browser you use. And I'm going to head over to MySQL's website, so it should be just mysql.com. Once you arrive here, there should be a Downloads tab at the top. And below that, there's a couple different versions. We could look at Enterprise here. This requires purchasing a license from them, but we can also just use the Community Edition, which is free. So I'll head over here, and I'll click on this MySQL Community Server. We'll scroll down here a little bit and take a look at our options. I am using a Windows machine here, so that's the platform I'll have selected. There are some zip files down below that contain the binaries and whatnot. I'm going to go ahead and use this MSI installer though. It just makes it a lot easier. Now the installer is listed as 32-bit, but it does contain the 64-bit file, so we'll use this. So I'll head over to the right, click on Download. If we scroll down a little bit further, now we see we have two options, one much smaller in file size than the other. I'm going to choose the larger file size, but the instructions are going to be mostly the same. Next, I'll click on Download, and they'll want you to sign up for an account, but you don't necessarily have to. You can click on this No Thanks, Just Start My Download link. Now, I already downloaded the installer, so I'm going to go ahead and just run that now. I'll go ahead and run this. Now, right after the start, there's a licensing agreement. Go ahead and read through it if you'd like. When you're ready, click on I accept the license terms, and click Next. Now, we could use this developer default setup type here, but it installs a lot of additional files that I don't necessarily need. So instead, I'm going to use a custom install. I'll come down here and click on the custom radio button, and I'll click Next. Now, in the very least, you want to come up here where it says MySQL servers, keep drilling down until you find one of these two options here. I'm using a 64-bit machine, so I'm going to use the x64 installer. This is the database itself that's going to house all of my data and my tables and so on. So technically, this is the bare minimum that I need. But there is one other item that's very useful to have here. If you go to Applications, expand that, there's this MySQL Workbench. Workbench is a front end to MySQL that makes managing the database much easier than using the command line client. So I'm going to drill down and again grab the x64 version. I'll come down here and click the Next button. Now this next step may or may not look a little bit different on your machine. Installing MySQL Workbench requires the .NET framework as well as the C++ redistributable. Now these files may already be on your computer. I have them on mine already, so that's why I'm not being prompted to download them. But just keep following along in the installer and it will automatically download and install them for you. Eventually, you'll come to this installation window. Go ahead and click the Execute button to begin. Now, if you downloaded the smaller installer, this next step may take a bit longer because it has to download those additional files. At any rate, we'll wait for this to finish. Once the installation is finished, we'll click the Next button. Next, we have to configure the server, so we'll go ahead and click the Next button. Now I'm going to leave all these options alone, though I could change the port number that MySQL is going to run on here if I want, but I'll leave that alone. I'll click Next again. And this part's very important. The root user needs a password set up for them. Now I'm going to use MySQL all lowercase. I do not recommend that you do this in a production environment or anytime that there'd be any sort of sensitive data within the database. Now I'm installing this on a test machine, so I can use a weak password, that's fine. But you may want to use something more complicated. Come down here and I'll click Next. We can change the name of the MySQL service or determine if we even want it to start up at system startup or not. I'm going to go ahead and leave these as the default options though. We'll click Next again. Now it's going to go through and apply all these configurations, so we'll go ahead and click the Execute button and let it run. Alright, looks like it finished successfully, so I'll click Finish, click the Next button, and we finished the installer. So there is this checkbox that says Start MySQL Workbench after startup. I'm going to leave that set to True, and click to Finish. And once you do, you should see MySQL Workbench pop up. You should see there is this local instance MySQL 57 already set up for you. If you just left click on it It'll ask you for the password we entered when we were running the installer, specifically for the root user. So I'm going to go ahead and type in whatever I typed in there, which was MySQL. I'll click OK. And here we are. So now we can make all kinds of changes or add new users to our database and so on. Now, one important change that occurred in MySQL 5.7 is that there is no longer a test schema automatically created for you. There's now the syst one. Some of the videos later on in this course make use of a test schema. So let's create that schema. I'll come up here above the navigator, and there's this Add a New Schema button. I'll click on that and name the new schema Test. I'll click the Apply button. It's going to show me the query it's going to run here. Click Apply one more time. Looks like it was successful. So I'll click Finish, and there's our test schema. So now I'm good to go for those future videos.